Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weiss. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is Adam Porter. Adam is the Chief Financial Officer for Musselman and Hall Contractors in Kansas City, Missouri. He is responsible for providing strategic oversight and leadership for the finance, information technology, and human resource functions of the organization. Adam grew up in Fremont, Nebraska, and received his undergraduate degree in finance from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and his MBA from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He is also a licensed CPA. He resides in Olathe, Kansas, with his wife, Amy, and their 9-month-old son, Dawson. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Today we'll be talking about problem solving. It's a critical skill and one that we can always improve upon. So let's get started. First, tell me about your career progression and how you got to where you are today.
You know, I find this interesting. I've listened to a few people speak and hear different stories how they get to become a CFO, and you know, a lot of it's taking the public accounting route and then kind of transitioning straight from there. I actually didn't like accounting in college. I graduated with a degree in finance from the University of Nebraska, and I took 2 accounting classes, and I just didn't like it. You know, I don't know what about it just didn't speak to me, and so I knew I was going to graduate with finance and move forward, and got my first job out of school, but just got my foot in the door as a billing analyst for a company here in Kansas City, but always knew I wanted to be a CFO, and so you know, I thought, you know, I'd work my way at the bottom, work hard, show people that I can really do things well and things like that. And staff accountant job opened up. And you know what? If I'm going to be a CFO someday, I probably need to understand accounting a little more than what I already do. So took that job. Within a matter of 6 months, I was working the full financials, doing the full accounting for a subsidiary company. And I really enjoyed it because I felt, you know, the debits and credits that the accounting world lives in is really the end result. In my opinion, I enjoyed the accounting because you have to solve the problem and you utilize the debits and credits to help solve that equation. And so that's really kind of what gravitated me towards that. You know, I am a CPA now and things like that, but it's just interesting how I grew to where I was. I, you know, got to a point where the first company that I was at, I kind of felt, you know, it was a transition period with the company and some things were changing, and I wanted to decide if I wanted to be a financial analyst and really kind of focus on analyzing and doing some of that stuff, or if I really wanted to be in the accounting corporate finance world. And, you know, I took a job with a public sector organization as a financial analyst, and it didn't take me too long to realize that, no, I really want to be with a company that cares about the bottom line and really wants to maximize efficiency and profitability and just doing things the right way, and people understanding and appreciating that, you know, income statement and balance sheet are important to the organization. And so, you know, kind of from there is kind of when I kind of gravitated, really kind of went full bore into the accounting world. And so, you know, with that, I decided, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get my CPA license. So not having under the total hours, I did have my MBA at that time, took online accounting classes, and then sat for the exam while I was working full time, and, you know, passed it successfully, and kind of move on and went from senior accountant to manager of financial operations, director of accounting, now to my current job at a different company as the chief financial officer for the last year and a half. So really kind of a different career path than probably what you see and probably what you've talked to of other CFOs, where it's, you know, I feel like it's a lot of, you know, public accounting, really understanding the business, audit, internal audit, things like that. And I just kind of gravitated towards, you know, and really, my opinion, comes down to a lot about problem solving, which I know is one of the topics we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I mean, I know it wasn't like that maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but I find more and more often that it is the case that CFOs didn't necessarily study accounting as an undergrad. So are there any particular stories or moves throughout your career that really stand out in your mind as turning points?
Yeah, I think, you know, going back to you know, the cross section of whether I wanted to be a financial analyst or a staff or an accountant, and just trying to be able to test both of those out. You know, I kind of did my toe in the water a little bit on the accounting side for, you know, a year, and then did my toe in the water on the financial analyst side, and just realized that that was the thing for me. And, the thing that really pushed me forward was committing and in my interviews for my my senior accountant job at the school that I was working at, that was interviewing for, telling them and making the point to say, I'm going to have my CPA license. I know it's not required, but it's important for me. It's important for the organization to have another person to have that designation, have that knowledge, go through what it takes to get that while working. And I think that just kind of proved to the leadership there that, hey, this is probably the guy that can really get us going in the right direction. So, it's really a lot of that. I kind of think of turning points a little bit, because that really kind of put me down the path and really kind of opened my eyes and kind of gave me clarity on the path that I needed to follow in order to get to my ultimate goal, which is to be a CFO.
Yeah, to me, that's amazing that you passed the CPA exam without an accounting undergrad. That's such a grueling test, and it speaks a lot to your commitment. So tell me about your current organization and what they do.
Yeah, so my current organization, we're a construction company, been around over 100 years in the area. In 2018, they actually converted to an ESOP. So we had an ownership structure change there. I started August of 2019, so I wasn't there for the transition. But through that period, they kind of realized that, we need somebody that can do a lot of things, that has a little more expertise than what, we previously had as a, closely held organization. And here at the company, we do things as far as, structural, foundational, concrete, all on the commercial side. And we do asphalt work. We do some railroad construction and maintenance for private customers. We don't work a lot with the mainline railroads, but really, we pride ourselves on being the quality relationship business. We're not there chasing the lowest price work and things like that. So it's really a fun organization to be a part of, because we value relationships, we value partnerships, and coming in as the CFO, evaluating relationships with different external organizations, it's making sure that we have partners that can help us grow. And, one of the things that I kind of look at, and one of the reasons I was brought in and excited about was, hey, we need an overhaul here, and so that spoke to my problem solving nature a little bit.
So, okay, let's talk about your specific problem solving skills. So what makes you a great problem solver, and how do you think you developed these skills?
I think I've always had it. And for me, I kind of think back to when I was younger, and even things as simple as going from point A to point B and trying to get there the fastest way possible, and knowing that if I take this turn versus that turn, I'm going to save a little bit of time. Funny story that I just happened to pop in my head was, I remember when I turned 16 and I was driving our family minivan, to and from our grandparents, and it was, a long stretch of interstate, and I, for some reason, thought, you know what, if I'm always on the inside of the turns, we'll get there a little bit faster. So I'm always trying to, for whatever reason, that spoke to me, and I always seem to find efficiencies in things that I do. I always feel that I can, find some of that stuff. And I think the biggest thing about that is just challenging the standard a little bit and asking why, and being able to not just ask why and be satisfied with the answer. I've had somebody, previous company that when I was kind of early on there, trust but verify was big, right? So, okay, well, why are we doing this? Well, it's the reason we've always done that. And while it may be the right answer, if we don't understand the why behind it, how do we know that's the right thing that we're doing? And what are the long-term impacts? And really challenging not only myself, but challenge the people around me that I'm talking with to think about that as well, because I can't fix everything. Getting people engaged and having them being part of the solution and seeing potential outcomes is really there. And so, frankly, it's a lot, just doing a lot of it and not being afraid to dig into stuff. And you've got to get your hands dirty. You can't be a problem solver by always being at the 50,000 foot view. And that's kind of one of the things that drove me to where I am today is when I got here, they needed me to be in the details. They needed me to figure out how can we do this better. And as we continue to grow throughout our careers, yeah, we get farther and farther removed, but there's always that level of ability when you've been into the details of, hey, how can we do this better, or why do we do this? So I think those are the questions that I always come back to and just constantly focus on, and making it a priority for our teams to be thinking about that as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important as we move up the ladder is just to always be questioning why things are done the way they are and how can they be done better, and just not getting comfortable with the status quo, like so easy to do.
Yeah, and I frankly tell my team, I don't always have all the answers. Challenge me on something, and that's the kind of culture that I've built is, it's a very collaborative effort. It's not Adam says this to his employees and that's what gets done and there's no pushback. I get it. I appreciate it. I value it. It's something that allows, our organization to get better. Frankly, it helps my team get better at problem solving because they're not just saying, oh, I got this idea, but I can't really share it. And then they have no way to see it all the way through. So it's really kind of that 360 approach to really kind of pushing back on both sides.
And as a CFO, I'm sure you're problem solving on a daily basis, but can you tell us a little bit about the bigger problems that you've had to work through over the last few years?
Yeah, I'll kind of go through a couple of different scenarios. One previous company I think was a really kind of helped propel me to where I am today. It was kind of going through completely ERP system upgrade, and it was getting into every single process on how we need to do it differently and how it would affect the output and just all the different things that go into your finance and accounting and HR systems, and really just trying to develop that. So systems wise, that was a really big feather in my cap, just being able to do that. As I came over a year and a half ago, the biggest thing that I stepped into on day one, I had to go through and fix our GL structure, our financial reporting. How do we know the information easily, how we're doing, what our, how our bookings are doing, what our percent completion is doing, how we can actually, trust the information that's in there. It just wasn't done in a way that I would expect and I would want my name next to. So I brought in a controller, and her and I spent a lot of time restructuring our GL and making sure we have the right accounts and making sure they're flowing the right way. That took a good 6 months to be able to get to that and go through a budget process and then start being able to use that information to forecast. So that was really the big thing that I did when I stepped into this role, was really just restructuring our GL to make sure that we could easily and effectively and efficiently provide financial data to our constituents, both internal and external. It just wasn't even set up in a way to where the internal leaders could see division, department specific information, all the way down to the net income line. And so once we've had that, you would not believe how many more questions and how much more curiosity happens when you do that. And it's really, have really seen a change in the organization of caring because they can now see the information. So there's been a lot, but that's the one that sticks out in my mind because it was just so critical to the success of our department.
And when you're problem solving, how do you ensure that you've identified the true problem and not just a symptom? In other words, how do you know that you've gotten to the root cause?
Yeah, sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes but again, I think as we kind of talked before, it's continuing to dig in, continuing to ask the question. And sometimes it's not just me, it's having some other people in the room that have a different perspective on something. And we do a really good job here of our executives get together at least once a week, and we're really close, and we really are here to help people because we all know that we all have something different to come in. It's not just Adam coming in and fixing. It's not just risk management coming in and talking about safety and policies and things like that. We all have different lenses and that we can view things through. And that's how we really as a company come together to find the true problem and the true root cause. As more from the accounting perspective, it's digging in, getting all the way to the transactional level. That's how we know, right? And then having conversations, where does that transaction come in? Is it from, a project manager or an estimator and why did it come in this way? And it's really just, again, those five basic questions that we all learned growing up, answer and help in so many ways.
And what does your problem-solving process look like? Where and how do you start?
Yeah, that is how you start is kind of interesting. It's one of those things. Sometimes it's you get a phone call, or it's you stumble across something, or you read something. I get a lot of information. I listen to CNBC every day and on the way to work just to kind of see what's going on in the world. And sometimes you hear people speak and you're like, wait a second, how does that apply to me? What are we doing about that? And then you kind of start going down this rabbit hole of, hey, what can we do? How can we do this? Or are we covered? Are we not? What's our risk? And it's really just kind of just absorbing as much as you can from all different areas, just listening to people. I walk around and try to get out on job sites as much as I can and walk around our different office locations in multiple cities and just kind of hear people's problems. They're the ones that are doing the work. They're the ones that are making us successful. And so getting an understanding and hearing them out to where, hey, they feel like they have a voice in the organization, which is always a great thing. We never want to, to curb that, but two, they're the ones that are really having the problem, and everybody, and it may not be their expertise to fix it, right? And that's where myself and our other management team can kind of step in and be like, okay, here's a problem that I'm hearing. We bring it up and kind of go from there. We actually, as a company, are developing, we're calling it a think tank meeting once a quarter, where anybody in the organization can bring something. What should we be doing that we're not? What should we stop doing that we are? And a lot of times what that will result in is, hey, we're doing the right stuff, but people just don't know why. And once they know why, then they're on board. So we've got a couple of different ways that we start collecting that information to kind of get that. And once you got the problem, then you get the right people in the room to start figuring out, okay, who's the key partners here? Is it somebody's division? Is it somebody's department? Is it an executive level, strategy? Do we need some legal advice? You kind of go case by case basis and start figuring out, okay, who are the players on the team that need to be involved in this? And then you kind of start going down the road there.
So I know you've already touched on this a bit with the importance of teamwork and getting the right people in the room. But so how do you make sure that you put together the right team, both to solve the problem and then make sure things run smoothly once the problem's been fixed?
Yeah, the team is big. I think it's big in whatever you're doing. And it's my job to continue to evaluate the team. The team that is in place when I arrived a year and a half ago is not going to be the same team that also is here today, that will also be here in 2 years and 3 years and 5 years, because people have different thoughts and different goals. And, sometimes those don't align with the organization, and it's not a bad thing. It is what it is sometimes. But, I think you always have to be constantly evaluating the team and making sure that you're setting people up for success, trying to give them opportunities where they see opportunity within the organization at a promotional level, and finding ways to keep good employees, and, coaching those employees that maybe they're falling short, and not being afraid of having those conversations. I think it's a little bit of, it's practice what you preach also, so if I'm exhibiting the right behaviors, then my team will exhibit those behaviors because they see that it's important. And, I think you're always going to have that good mix of the people that are kind of keeping the day-to-day and the people that are really more your strategic level staff. And I'm always going to push that the strategic level staff needs to be in the details to understand and to have that team aspect, because we're all one team. So everybody has a job and they all kind of need to do their own things. But at the end of the day, we all need to be cross-trained as well as we can, so we can kind of help out. And, and frankly, that goes a long ways to keeping things running smoothly. And that's continuity and being customer service. I preach that a lot to our vendors, to our employees, to our customers. The only way we do that the best way is if everybody's pulling the same direction and everybody understands what their roles are, what other people's roles are, and how help out as necessary.
Yeah, and I'm sure the cross-training is great for bringing a fresh set of eyes to a process.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the piece that I can share with people. It's like, hey, like it's okay that somebody's going to come in and learn your job, because they might find a way that you've been doing this for the last 5 years this one way because that's how you were trained. That's how it made sense to you. It felt efficient. You bring somebody else in and we're going to make your job easier, and you can then do more. You can take on more stuff, which then allows me to say, hey, then we can promote you, because that's how you get to the next level, is by taking on more stuff. And so, yeah, you're 100% right. It's those new, fresh eyes, and it's challenging. And, sometimes it's a lot of work for the new person to come in and try and figure everything out. But, it's a lot of that stuff. The other thing we're trying to do is, develop process documentation and kind of having everybody kind of own that, because I found throughout my years, as you develop processes and you write them down on paper, you find one or two steps you're like, I'm not really sure why I do that. And so not only just from a good educational standpoint and a good documentation perspective to have that, it does actually help the problem solving process by having good documented procedures.
Yeah, totally agree. And how do you encourage your employees to be creative and innovative when it comes to problem solving?
Yeah, I think it's something to where, it's rewarded by having just conversations with myself. We're not a huge department, right? So I'm heavily involved. I understand everybody and understand what's going on. And a lot of times all anybody's asking for, and all they really want, is a kudos or a congratulations or a good job. That was really awesome. Here is what the company is going to benefit. And I think to keep people invested in understanding what's going on, always understand the end result and how it affects the entire organization. Sure, I saved 2 steps here, but what does that really mean? When you can kind of lay it out, well, that means that these 2 people don't have to do this, so they can be more efficient on their time, and the job is more profitable. And so we are able to kind of share some of that insight with them. That allows them to, oh, wow, so then I actually have an impact to our profitability and maybe getting more work and having more customers. And it's really buying them in and getting them bought into the overall big picture. The more we can do, the better it is. And it's also a lot of education. I'm not going to lie there. It's educating that time is an investment. Yes, it may take you 5 hours to come up with a new way to do something, but if it saves you 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week, you've saved how much time over the course of the year that we can be doing other things. And, again, people always kind of gravitate what's important to me. It's being able to lay that out. And, it's not just a one-time conversation either. It's continuing in team meetings and in different conversations of how important is it, what's the benefit, and things like that. It's just really getting to who they are as an individual and making them and getting them to understand the bigger picture.
And one of the hardest steps of fixing a process is change management. So how do you overcome organizational resistance and get people to start doing things in a new way once something's been fixed?
Yeah, great question. And that's something that every organization, no matter how successful, struggles with in some manner. The biggest thing that we can do, and again, I kind of learned this going through different system implementations from, my previous company, was making sure you're bringing in the right people as you're developing the process. So we're implementing some things from an IT perspective and making sure the different field supervisors and the different divisions are a part of that group. And when it comes to things about just different incentive plans that we're working on to help drive productivity and promote efficiency and profitability, bringing in the people that are the end stakeholders. You've got to bring in the right mix of people. And the way that I've done that here is, asking, the division leadership, hey, could you nominate somebody to help out with this? And then I get to tell those groups of people, hey, you've been nominated to be part of this solution. That gets them buy-in right away. And then they can kind of see this whole thing as a positive rather than something that the CFO wants to change because we're not making enough money or something like that. That's my my view sometimes. But it's really getting buy-in throughout the entire process and communicating and encouraging them to communicate to their peers that, hey, this is going on. Let me know what questions you have. And the more people you can involve, the better your change is gonna be received. And we just learned that the hard way as an organization. And, it's things that I have to overcome, as I lead not only accounting, but I lead IT and human resources, just bringing people in to help out with the solution, because they feel like they have ideas and they want to know that, hey, this isn't just coming down from the top. It's a solution based and a company based solution, I should say. And I think, again, that helps the overall buy-in.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I feel like people want to be part of the change and not just have change forced down upon them.
Yeah, and honestly, and sometimes like myself, sometimes it's hard to even think through that if you haven't been through that process of, well, I've been this problem solver. I think I know what the right thing to do is, and you just lose the one little small scenario that if you had somebody else bring up while you're going through the process change, probably could have fixed something. It probably would have helped with morale on the rollout. Maybe would have been a better process. And if you thought it was better, now you have to go and change something again. So yeah, it just helps in so many ways by encouraging that. And again, it's hard, especially as you kind of you've grown up as the problem solver and then the leader. And it's like, okay, well, I know this. Yeah, I know this. But it's all about the team at the end of the day. Company culture, morale, doing things the right way, working as a team, like all of those things trump just being the dictator role and pushing people to their breaking points to squeeze every bit of profitability out of a job or out of a process. And it's such a longer lasting way to do business, and our culture is definitely embracing it.
And are there specific tools or technologies that you find to be particularly helpful these days?
It's just collecting data. I think we use Excel, Google for spreadsheets and just trying to capture as much data as we can. That to me is the biggest differentiator as we're trying to communicate these solutions to people, or why we're changing this is, if we have the data captured from the beginning point, being able to understand it, to analyze it, to think through it, what does it mean, and then go through this change process, and then showing how the data has changed in a positive way. Again, another great way to be able to communicate and to get buy-in. And so really for me, it's really just making sure you've got the right people, you've got the data to help support your solutions. And frankly, if there's something you're not tracking, start tracking it. It's hard to always go back 3 months, 6 months, 2 years on the data, but if you don't start tracking something that's important, you're never going to be able to really see and prove out the benefit. You're always just going to have, yeah, my gut says this worked well, but you don't really know. And so as much of that as we can as an organization, and just asking for feedback. My tools and technologies that I really feel like are most important is just communication, asking and listening and having conversations with people, what's important to them.
Yeah, communication is one tool that will never go away for sure. And lastly, on a more personal note, what's one goal that you're hoping to achieve this year, either personally or professionally?
Yeah, so I'll do one of each. It's always a fun question to think about, and making sure that we're completing our goals. Post COVID, my wife and I have a 9-month-old, and trying to maybe do something for ourselves and maybe get away a little bit later this summer or this fall, and just kind of being mindful about doing so. So that's kind of my personal one, and just being able to recharge. Professional goal is, I've got a strategic hire that I'm just starting the process, and I'm really excited about it. The company is really excited about it. They weren't excited about it a year and a half ago when I started, and now the rest of the company is just, Adam, why have we not hired this position yet? And so I'm excited to get that going. It'll take some work off of my plate at a more detailed level, allow me to be a little more strategic. But But other than that, the company will just see tremendous benefits out of it. And so I'm excited to get that going and get that hopefully crossed off the list here in the next couple of months.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love both of those. And with a 9-month-old, so important that you do take time for you and your wife. So
for sure.
Adam, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun. I appreciate the conversation and, always enjoy talking about problem solving.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our discussion and getting to know you and hearing about your experiences. And problem solving is an area that we all need to continue to grow in. And you've given us some really great advice today. To all of our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion as well. And I hope you'll tune in next week. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great week.
If you're ready to boost efficiency and streamline your accounting processes at significant cost savings, it's time to talk with Personiv. Their people-powered solutions have transformed the delivery of back-office tasks and general accounting functions for decades, partnering with clients to provide everything from accounts payable to payroll services. See what Personiv can do for you by visiting personiv.com.
You've been listening to CFO Weekly, presented by Personiv. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear all of our episodes. Want to learn more? Check out personiv.com. Thanks for listening.